Hi, welcome to Rock and Metal Invasion. My name is Steve. Coming up on the show today, I'm doing Doro, the solo albums. So in a way, this is part 3 of my Warlock and Doro series that I've been doing. In the first two parts, I covered the Warlock albums. Part 1, the first two Warlock albums, and in part 2, the third and fourth Warlock albums. And so now I'm going to cover the Doro. Doro Pesh, of course, was the vocalist in Warlock. I'm going to cover her solo albums, and she's done quite a few, so I'm not going to go through them all, but carry on now from the album that came out after the Warlock album, Triumph and Agony, and that was Force Majeure, this one here. Now, what's interesting about this one, which is why sometimes people still call it a Warlock album or associate it with Warlock, because some copies, and my one does as well, have plus Warlock written on the cover. So initially, I thought that was just more about just advertising promotion. They just wanted to, people to know that this is the singer from Warlock, and if you like Warlock, you want to check this album out. But I've actually since my understanding is that they actually wanted this to be a Warlock album, but there were some issues with naming rights, management, things like that, and so it basically became a Doro solo album. But yeah, they maybe with the thinking that could still be associated with Warlock, or maybe they would be called Doro and Warlock. But in the end, future pressings of the album just had Doro on it, and I think really that makes sense, because at this stage, and when you think about what's going to happen in the future, the band members are come and go, but Doro, of course, is the constant. So let's have a look at this album. So Force Majeure, I was pretty excited when I saw this was coming out. However, my excitement was lessened somewhat when I saw the first music video for the album. I actually saw the music video before I picked up the album, and it is, of course, you may already know this, it was a cover of Procol Harum song, A Whiter Shade of Pale. So this was actually the first single. It is, of course, not a heavy song. I mean, nothing wrong with covering that song, but I cannot believe it was released as the first single. Not even that. It's the first song on side 1. So I don't know. They must have really thought this was going to be huge, and they just needed to put that out there. So yeah, when I saw that, it was the complete opposite to what happened to me when I saw All We Are. So the previous album, Warlock album, I saw All We Are, and I was like, my God, who is this band? This is amazing. I love the song. Still love that song. Great music video. But yeah, complete opposite, of course. I mean, I don't hate A Whiter Shade of Pale. I just don't necessarily want, hard rock or heavy metal artists that I like to be doing it as, covering that song. I mean, there's a little bit of a guitar solo in there, but pretty much it's not that different from the original. It's not a heavy song, and yet it kicks off the album. So it's a really weird way to start the album. Really weird choice as first single. I mean, if you were going to do that as a second single, fine, or third single, no problem. But yeah, and also the placement on the album, it's the first track. So it really puts me off wanting to put the album on in some ways, because that's the first song. But I guess in the other way you can look at it, you can just go straight to song 2, which is what I usually do. And thankfully, the rest of the album is pretty much Triumph and Agony Part 2. It just carries on from that album. Now, granted, there's no All We Are on there, nothing as good as that, but Triumph and Agony didn't really have anything else as good as that either. Save My Soul, Hard Times, really, they're two of the standout songs for me. It's a very similar lineup yet again, and that's probably why it does sound so similar to Triumph and Agony, because yet again, she's got the same producer coming in. So Joey Ballin is coming in to be producer. Same bass player, Tommy Henriksen. They've got John Levin coming in on guitar. And yeah, so this is the lineup that recorded Force Majeure. It's a good album. It did relatively well. The previous album, Triumph and Agony, had actually gone gold in Germany, and they had charted and the top 100 on the Billboard charts. In Europe, this had success, but not so much in the US. Got to 154 on the Billboard 200, which is probably a bit of a disappointment. But it did not take long for Doro to come back and release her next album, which was self-titled. So a little over a year later, and Doro is back with her second solo album, just self-titled. This time there's no plus Warlock written on there, so she's totally a solo artist now. And this came out in 1990. Now, interesting with this album is that she gets in contact with Gene Simmons, who was a bit of a childhood idol for her, and he really gets involved. At this time, of course, he's producing bands, had his own label, Simmons Records. He's got House of Lords, and he's involved with a few other bands. He'd worked with Black and Blue, bands like that. In fact, on this album, Tommy Thayer, who of course now is in Kiss, is a co-producer on the album, and there is also a Black and Blue song on this. So that on this album, there's a song called Rock On, which is a Black and Blue cover. There's a cover of a Kiss song, Only You, and Gene Simmons has also helped with the songwriting on a couple of songs. But for me, the best song is, and there was a music video for this. It was the first single, only single I think for this album, Unholy Love. And it's actually, for me, I think this one here, first song on the album, for me, it's probably one of Doro's best songs. It's very catchy, very commercial, but still good hard rock. She's definitely moving away from that sort of, Euro metal, power metal sound that she had with Warlock. This is much more that sort of, commercial pop metal sound that was coming out in the late 80s, early 90s. It's written by Adam Mitchell, who has, made songwriting contributions on Kiss albums. So, and this is pretty much a lot of the, Gene Simmons has brought on a lot of the Kiss crew, so to speak, to help out on this album. There's a few covers as well on here. Apart from the Black and Blue and Kiss, there's also a cover by the band The Electric Prunes, I Had Too Much to Dream. It's a good album. I must admit, I feel like it's not as strong as the previous one, but also at the same time, there wasn't a song as good as Unholy Love on the previous album either. So, real standout song there. The rest of the songs are okay, but it's obviously got a little bit more mainstream, not quite as heavy. And I think I like the heavier songs more on Force Majeure. But a good album. I mean, it didn't get great reviews. Looking at some of the reviews for this album, it's kind of in the middle. Middle. It's not like a total bomb, but it's not a real standout album. And so, interestingly enough, it doesn't really take her that much time. Just like, I guess, this album didn't take her much time to come out with a new album. She comes out again with another album the following year. So in 1991, she's releasing her third solo album. It's her third solo album inside 3 years. And this one's coming out a little bit less than a year than, from her previous album. So it's taken even a little bit less than a year for her third album, True at Heart, to come out. So not a lot of time given for her self-titled album. Basically, they released one single. They even released Doro and Warlock Greatest Hits in between this time as well. This one comes out. And Gene's not in the picture anymore. So the Kiss crew are all out the way, move out the way now. And she's deciding to... she hooks up with this guy called Barry Beckett, who I think is, known more, I think, in the country music genre. And but he's out in Nashville, and so she goes out there, and so this is where it's recorded. And basically, just like she does do with her solo album, she tends to find somebody, work with them. They bring in people, and they do the album together, sort of thing. So She had Joey Bellin, she's had Gene Simmons, and so now she's got Barry Beckett. This also has another really good first single. So, you know, the previous album, Unholy Love, which I thought was a great first single. This one also has love in the title. Cool Love. That's a really good song. That kicks off the album. That was a single as well. Really good song. Heart-shaped tattoos, another favorite of mine. It's actually a really good album, I think. I think a little bit more consistent than the previous one. Like I said, the previous one had quite a few covers, and it definitely had that Gene Simmons influence there. And I don't know that that's necessarily a good match for Doro. Yeah, so she's also working with this guy, Gary Scruggs. He's a Nashville guitarist, so he does a lot of the songwriting on here. But yeah, she brings in some other outside songwriters as well. Yeah, it wasn't a big hit. I mean, of course, again, 1990. This is 1991, so yeah, this sort of music's getting less and less popular. She's still on a major label, and of course, still I think very popular in Europe, but in America not so much. So that popularity with this type of music definitely starting to wane a little bit. But she's still going strong, and this is not the end. She does actually come back a couple years later. It's a couple years time this time, and in 1993 she releases Angels Never Die. So here we have Doro and Angels Never Die. This is the 1993 release. This is actually a 2021 reissue, so I never got this on vinyl back in the day. To be honest, I wasn't that quick to get a CD copy of it either. It didn't get a lot of release. This album was not released in the States. It was only released in Europe, and I think it had pretty limited success even in Europe, where in the past you'd been quite successful. I mean, at this time, 1993, grunge is in total full effect, and this type of music really not so popular. But yeah, nice to see this. I think it did get it. I think you could get copies of this on vinyl back in the day, but very limited amounts. And if you did want it, it was very expensive because of its rarity. But yeah, you can now get it. This is a really nice 2 LP set. But yeah, she's on this album. She's working with She's hooked up with another producer this time. She's working with Jack Ponte, who's quite well known. He's just worked with Alice Cooper on the Hey Stupid album. And Alice had some success there. Jack Ponte's quite well known as a songwriter, producer, worked with a lot of hair metal bands in the late 80s, early 90s. A little bit similar to Desmond Child. I always find his songwriting it's quite noticeable, especially in the choruses. He always seems to have very similar choruses. They're very catchy. And yeah, so this is an interesting album because this is not grunge at all. This is very much that early 90s, late 80s, almost hair metal kind of sound. Very commercial. Again, she's not doing the power metal, Euro metal that she was doing with Warlock. Yeah, a lot more mainstream and commercial. But of course, in 1993, you'd argue this is not mainstream. This is the alternative. This is now alternative music, really, to be putting out an album like this. But yeah, and for me, this is an album that hasn't really. There's no real standout songs for me, but at the same time, there's some good solid songs. I like the song "Crying." Eye on You and Bad Blood. I think there's a music video for Bad Blood, and I know that the video for Bad Blood was voted best anti-racism video at the MTV Europe Music Awards in 1994. So it did get a little bit of publicity, but yeah, it's and it had quite a few singles as well. I think there's 3 or 4 singles were released. But yeah, likewise, again, no American release, and yeah, pretty limited success in Europe. But a solid album. What I would say with Doro is, I I don't know if she's really ever done that. Really, wow, that's the Doro album you got to have. That's the real standard album. But they're always very consistent, very solid albums. So yeah, this is Doro and Angels Never Die from 1993. So in 1995, she releases her next album. Now this one is again she's working with Jack Ponti, and this is her fifth album, but this one she's starting to embrace some more industrial elements, which at the time was quite popular, but still working with Jack Ponti. So it's quite interesting because it's almost like a industrial hair metal album. Really, it's still got those Jack Ponti type choruses. He's still contributing to a lot of the songwriting. Now I don't actually have a copy of this album. You can get it on vinyl, but it's big money. I think this is quite a good album. I actually like quite a number of the songs, especially Tie Me Up, Ceremony. That'd be two of my favorites from this album. Like I say, I don't have a copy of it. I used to have a copy on CD. I'm not quite sure what happened to that, but I have a feeling that it'll possibly be reissued on vinyl sometime soon. So that's what I'm kind of hoping for. Because I definitely would like to pick this up. It's like I say, got some industrial elements. There's even some remixes that have been done by Die Krups, that sort of industrial band that did Metallica covers and so forth. And yeah, I think some of it sounds really good. It's not the typical Doro sound, but there's elements of it there. It's if there weren't these sort of industrial elements added to it, it would sound actually pretty similar to Angels Never Die, the previous album that she did. So now, yeah, so again, though, she's working with Jack Ponti, so that's probably why it would still sound kind of similar, but it's just got that those industrial elements added to it. I also, just before this album came out, she also put out a live album as well, which again, I don't have, but that's worth checking out because that's got a number of tracks from her time in Warlock and also her solo, some songs from her solo albums, and I think some unreleased songs as well. So that's worth checking out. All right, but that's Machine to Machine, and that came out in 1995. So then we go to 1998, and we've got Love Me in Black. So this is her sixth album. And yeah, again, there's some industrial influences coming through here. She's on a new record label on WEA, having left Polygram, who she had been with since 1985, with Warlock and then through her solo albums as well. So new label and a slightly new sound, I suppose. But again, like I say, she was definitely there were definitely industrial elements to her album on her previous album, and that she has retained those for this album as well. She's got some American producers coming in to help her with this one. Now, I picked this up when it got reissued on vinyl because I really actually quite like this album. It's not like those late 80s, mid 80s Warlock or Doro albums. It's hard rock with some industrial elements. I mean, and some people might say it's industrial metal. Definitely, I mean, actually, the title track "Love Me in Black" is quite heavy and a really good song. And same with "Brutal and Effective." Really, that's a great song. "Love Me in Black," which I think there's a music video for that one, which is a ballad, but it's actually a really good one. I really like that song. So first three songs for me are really good. I don't know about the rest of the album. It's okay. There's not really bad Doro songs for me. There's just some better than others. So yeah, it's a good album. I like it. So like I say, yeah, I was happy to pick this up on vinyl when it got reissued on vinyl. I don't think it was ever actually issued on vinyl, but so when it was put out on vinyl, I think this came out a couple of years ago. So yeah, good to have. This album kind of reminds me a little bit of Shotgun Messiah and Violent New Breed, their album I think they put out around 93, where they had been a hair metal band who sort of then started taking on some industrial influences, and you can definitely notice that on that album. And yeah, I think it sounds a little bit similar to this one. So yeah, if you're expecting that Warlock type sound, Euro power metal type sound, yeah, no, and you don't like a bit of industrial influence, you're probably not going to like this album. But yeah, I like it, and it is the last album she does before, believe it or not, she does sort of go back to that sort of sound that she had in the late sort of 80s. So when she starts actually going back to that sound. So which most people would have thought maybe was never going to happen, but throughout the 2000s and up till now, she's really embraced more of that sound that she had at the start of her career. And I think that's probably due to the fact that that sound and heavy metal has become a little bit more popular again. Through the 90s, of course, it wasn't so popular. So, and maybe herself had sort of started to be influenced by other sounds and genres and things like that. So, and of course, when you're a professional musician and you're on a big record company, they're going to sort of want you to be successful, and they're going to want you to follow the trends that are happening. So, after this album, she's gone more to those, rather than those big major labels, more those independent labels that are metal labels. And yeah, so she's been, releasing those types of albums. Now, I'm not going to go into her albums from the 2000s, because there's still quite a bit. She's very prolific. She tours a lot, and still very popular. So there's been some sort of semi reunions with Warlock, but nothing really official, I suppose. And they've done some concerts and so forth. But essentially, she's a solo artist, and still putting out new music. And I think there's going to be new music coming out at the end of this year as well. So there we have it. I've covered Warlock, and I've covered Doro and her solo album. So quite a lot there. And like I said, I'm not going to cover the stuff from the 2000s. Maybe sometime down the line I'll get into that. But hope you've enjoyed that. Make sure you hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Leave a comment. Let me know, what's your favorite Doro album? I'd love to know. All right, that's it for now. We'll catch you later.